Hey there, so I don't want to waste any of your time. You are watching me now on the iPhone 13 Pro, and this is the standard wide angle lens in 4K at 25 frames a second. So in this full review, I want to use the iPhone as much as possible, just so we can compare it to the usual cameras that we use here at Editor's Keys. So as mentioned, this is 4K at 25 frames a second, but there's lots of talk about that cinematic mode and that nice blurry background. So now let's instantly switch to cinematic mode. So this is the cinematic mode on the iPhone 13 Pro. What do you think of this? How is it cutting me out? Does it look any good? So after the intro, of course, we're going to talk more about the iPhone and some of the new features. But because every iPhone is fairly similar these days, in this review, I'm going to talk mainly about the cameras. What's new with the screens, what's new with the lenses, and what can you actually do with these new cameras? And also, what do we think of this cinematic mode? Now, just for sort of show, just so you can see the difference between this and our usual Sony a7S III, we're going to put the a7S III back in this position so you can see what the bokeh looks like between this and a really professional £4,000 camera. Right, so we've switched to the Sony a7S III, and I know if you know your cameras, this is not a fair test at all. This camera is worth about £4,000 here in the UK. The lens that is on the camera is worth about £1,000. So we're comparing £5,000 worth of professional camera gear against a £1,000 iPhone. But really, we're looking at this not in terms of an overall picture quality, but look at the bokeh. You know, is it massively different? Let me know in the comments from the new cinematic mode in the iPhone Pro 13. But before we jump into it, this video is sponsored by Buckle & Band. So if you have an Apple Watch and you're looking for a new high quality luxury handmade leather strap, check out Buckle & Band. The website will be launching soon and you can sign up there for the first editions of the straps. And there's even straps which have half leather, half silicone, so you can just really improve the look of your Apple Watch and match it with your everyday wear. But let's jump into the video. Hey there, welcome to the video. I'm Mark Brown from Editor's Keys. Now, this part of the video is being shot on the Sony a7S III, and as mentioned in the intro, we're going to try and do as much of this video as we can on the brand new iPhone. But I just wanted to show you this before we get started, essentially. I went for the iPhone 13 Pro, kind of regular size. Last year, I had the iPhone 12 mini, and you know what? I absolutely loved this mini size. I think it's just the perfect phone. But in all honesty, the battery life on the mini just isn't good enough for me personally. I think for a lot of people, it would be perfect, but I actually film a lot of content on my iPhone. So the fact that you get much better battery life in this, and you get the better cameras, and you get the macro mode and a few other features, it really just made me want to switch back to the regular size. So that's what I'm doing this year. Now, in this review, I'm not going to do a full iPhone review. You know, if you've owned any iPhone over the last 10 years, they really kind of work the same. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the new features, including the new cameras, the new screen, and the battery life. Before we jump into the cameras and we show you loads and loads of video footage, I just want to talk about the new screen, which is on the iPhone 13 Pro. And unfortunately, it's only on the iPhone 13 Pro models. And that's the new 120 Hz screen on this new iPhone. And basically, it makes all the animations buttery smooth. So older iPhones and the kind of regular iPhone 13s have a 60 Hz screen. This new one has a 120 Hz screen that can ramp up and down. So if you're scrolling through Twitter or your contacts list, all of the animations should look buttery smooth. Now, I'll be honest, a lot of YouTubers out there said that once you see this, you just cannot go back. And for me, I don't know if it's that big enough of a deal for me personally. It's definitely smoother. It definitely looks nicer. And you know, it does make the phone feel a lot more fluid, but I wouldn't really care if I went back to a 60 Hz screen. It doesn't really bother me that much, but it is a nice improvement. Now, because we're filming at 25 frames a second, this won't come across on camera, but trust me, it does look a little bit better than previous iPhones. So I'll try and show you the difference here on the 120 Hz screen. We're going to film this at a higher frame rate to try and see if we can capture this. So on the iPhone 13 on the left, you should see the animations just animate slightly smoother. When you scroll through things, you should see, if we slow this down, that the iPhone on the right, which is at 60 Hz, kind of judders very slightly, and the iPhone on the left should go very smooth. Now, you can't see this on camera, but essentially when you do go through some lists like Twitter, for example, you can kind of tell it does look a lot smoother. But as I mentioned, I don't think this is as huge as a deal as a lot of YouTubers are saying. It's definitely smoother, but it's not one of those things that would really bug me. I think on an iPad, it does, because the iPad is bigger. You might use the Apple Pencil. Really with this, you're kind of reading through tweets and checking emails and just checking the weather. For a lot of things other than games maybe, or watching content back, you're not going to be doing a high amount of scrolling at high speed. So it's good to have, and it's nice it's there, but it's not such a big deal for me. But let me know in the comment section below what you think of this. Now let's talk about those cameras. Now, there were 3 cameras in the iPhone 12, but all 3 cameras have had a full upgrade. So there's still the ultra wide, the wide, and the telephoto, but this year they feature bigger sensors and allow a lot more light, which generally always makes for better photos. The wide angle lens allows 2.2 times more light in than last year, and this means you'll get much better low light performance. The ultra wide angle lens now also features autofocus too, something it didn't actually have before. Plus, there's also a LiDAR scanner on the back to allow for some great nighttime portrait mode shots. Now, if you want to know the aperture on these new cameras, they are as follows. The wide is an f1.5 aperture, the ultra wide is an f1.8, and the telephoto is now f2.8. Now actually, there's also a 4th lens to talk about. Now there has been a powerful update to autofocus that now allows macro photos and videos at just 2 centimeters, meaning you can capture some really close-up shots. I really do love this. Now check these shots out. Now, the ultra-wide lens allows 92% more light in both videos and photos, and you know what? You can really tell. I've always loved the wide-angle lens and I use it all the time, but you would often see a big drop in quality on previous iPhones, but not anymore. There's the 3 times optical zoom, up from 2.5 times zoom in the iPhone 12 Pro. Now, if I'm honest, I don't think the zoom lenses are all that good. I mean, yes, they're handy to have, but the quality wasn't and really still isn't the best. I tend to avoid using it unless I really have to. And actually, I would prefer cropping into the regular wide angle lens, but it does allow for some nice portrait modes. So this is one plus if you're thinking of getting the standard iPhone 13 or iPhone 13 mini. If you don't really need the telephoto, you could save some money there. So this is the iPhone 13 Pro cinematic mode. Now, what you should be seeing is I should be in focus and Lewis should be out of focus. If I turn to face Lewis, it should automatically make Lewis in focus and me out of focus. But now I'm going to turn back to camera and it should make me in focus. So it's all automatic, all really, really clever. But what do you think? Does it look real to you? Now, the good thing is, I'm going to turn to face Lewis again, is let's say we want me to stay in focus and Lewis to be out of focus. You can change this in post by tapping anywhere on the video. So we'll try that out and we'll show you how that works. Okay, so one of the great things about the new cinematic mode is that you can actually edit the focus points at any point you wish. So I'm gonna go to edit here and you'll see the iPhone create some little keyframes here along the bottom. And that's when the iPhone has decided when it's gonna change focus. But from here, let's just say I wanted Lewis to be in focus. We could simply tap Lewis's face and he would be the one in focus. And you can see it's added some new keyframes here and Lewis is remaining in focus. But of course you can change this at any point throughout your video or to any other subject. So you don't have to worry if the iPhone's messed up during filming or you've messed up, you can edit this. The other great thing you can do is actually change the f-stop just like a real camera. Now, if you're new to f-stops, essentially a lower f-stop will make the background more blurry, like so. And the higher the number, the less out of focus the background will go. So you can see f16 there. It's a little bit of background blur, but it's still fairly in focus. If we take it all the way up to the top, you can see Lewis is completely blurred there. Now, what I've found is if you go to 2, 2.5, 2.8, you sometimes get a bit of a halo effect that you'll see on some of the other clips we're about to play. So I'd recommend maybe taking this down to maybe 3 or 4, just so it blends in nicely around your hair. Now, let's say you want to take out this effect altogether. Simply tap the cinematic mode at the top, and this will take it back to a normal looking shot where everything is in focus. Overall, I think this works really well, and it's so impressive you can get this kind of effect on an iPhone. But remember, this is an effect, and as you can see on this shot of this can of Sprite, it really doesn't cut out the can very well at all. So you do really need to pick and choose what objects you're going to use this cinematic mode with. Now, I wouldn't recommend you film a whole video just using the cinematic mode, but I actually think for the odd shot here and there, or just to add more depth to your headshots, I think this could work really well, especially when you mix it with the regular 4K footage. Now, the major downside to cinematic mode, in my opinion, is that you can only film in 1080p, and we film everything in 4K here, so that's a bit disappointing. And also, you can only film in 30 frames a second, so there's no 24 or 25 frames a second for us here in Europe. So hopefully they'll update that in a future software update. So this is a vlogging test with the iPhone 13 Pro's front-facing camera. Now, this hasn't really changed since the 11 or the 12, so you won't really see much of a difference. I think the HDR has been improved a little bit. It's still a pretty good camera, but it's all right if you've got the right lighting. What I would recommend actually is, if you can, spin the camera around and always try and use the wide camera on the back of the camera if you want the best quality. So I'll show you that now. So now we're using the wide camera on the iPhone 13 Pro, and I would always recommend that you do this because you'll get much better image quality if you can use the rear cameras. Now, obviously you can't see yourself on the back of the iPhone, so if you have an Apple Watch, you can see the viewer on the Apple Watch itself, which is really good. There's a little app for that. And also, if you're wondering what am I using for this, this is a Moment MagSafe adapter, which just means you can magnetically attach and detach your phone really fast, and a Joby microphone. So if you want to see a review to either of these products, check out the box up here or the link in the description below. Now, just to mix things up, this is now the ultra-wide camera on the back of the iPhone, and normally I would never use this to do any sort of vlogging because the quality wasn't very good before and it didn't have autofocus, but now it does have autofocus. What do you think of this? Again, you can use this to give you a little bit more context of where you are. So we're going down this back street and you can probably see the cars in the background. Maybe even I flip around, you can see the police behind me and the Manchester Library. So now you can actually use this ultra-wide lens for vlogging. So what do you think of the quality of this? I actually think it's been massively improved, and I'll be using this a lot more for a lot of our videos. Now, ProRes is also coming soon. Now, when we were filming this video, it wasn't available yet, so keep subscribed to the channel if you want to see a video on that. Okay, so let's talk about battery life. So I went from the iPhone 12 mini, and as I mentioned near the intro, the battery life just really wasn't good enough for me, and it's a real shame because I just think the form factor of this phone, the weight, everything is just perfect, just apart from that battery life. You see, when I first got the phone, it wasn't too bad, but with any iPhone, it degrades over time. And I film a lot on my iPhone. I take a lot of photos for business and pleasure, and by about 6 p.m, it would be down to 20%, which just isn't good enough for me. And since the pandemic has slowed down and we've been able to go out again, I went on a recent trip to London and I was using the phone for maps to get around London and for the underground. And I just found that the iPhone died, the iPhone 12 mini died by about 4 p.m. So it just wasn't good enough. So I'm really pleased to say that this iPhone 13 Pro's battery has been so good. I've been using it every day quite heavily since I've got it. And even with taking 4K videos, playing around with cinematic mode, using the iPhone more than I was using the iPhone 12 mini, I'm getting to the end of a day and still having 50 to 60% battery life left. So I won't need to carry around an extra cable or charging pack. It's really, really good. And I think for a lot of people, having that bigger battery in here and that improved battery life is almost worth an upgrade alone. I mean, let me know in the comments below, does battery life really annoy you? But I can report happily, the battery life is absolutely solid in this new phone. Now that's our look at the cameras on the new iPhone 13 Pro. And I've got to say, I've been really, really impressed with this. I've always been a fan of the iPhone for filmmaking. And I always say to anyone I know, if you're thinking of starting in YouTube or starting in film, start by using your iPhone. It's so powerful. And this year, it's got a whole lot more powerful. You can actually use that wide angle lens now for nighttime shots. It's got autofocus. The macro mode is great. It's got 4K and it's got that cinematic mode. And other than that, there's just improved battery life and a whole host of other features like that 120 Hz screen that I think actually make this year's iPhone upgrade a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. But let me know in the comments section below, would you be upgrading to the iPhone 13 Pro? And if you are, what phone are you coming from? I'd love to hear from you. But anyway, thanks for watching, and make sure to check out our other videos up here.